distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies.
The solutions question to fixing our problems come from every fight we see springing up, and we support it in any way, from direct action in response to murders committed by the police, to guerrilla gardening, to building a neighborhood library in the lobby of your residential building. It all contributes to building a community of insurgents. There is no program of solutions I offer because I believe people should employ whatever means there are to challenge the system, and whatever works, works, and should be expanded on, and whatever doesn't work needs to be retooled. Solutions, quote unquote, as presented by our current political leadership, are really just distractions and band-aids. And that is all that they want to offer as a distraction while they do their work of economic management for the ruling class. That's why sheeple love to ask radicals, what are your solutions? What are your solutions? When we try to answer, we get nothing but blank stares or dismissive reactions because we only see the bigger picture. Therefore, when we talk about steps to changing things, it will have nothing to do with voting for the same usual suspects of politicians who aren't looking to dismantle a system of control. You all think Band-Aid solutions. You all need to unpack your conditions of mental conformity, and you'll see that the solutions you seek are going to require a lot more than the dogmatic carrot on a stick that the Democratic Party or the Republicans talk about. I covered the ideology part and what I believe in the last episode, or part 1. Now I'm just going to go on my takeaways from the activist years and how they shaped me. So by 1992, I was wiped, burned out because I threw myself into 3 different organizations, each representing 3 different respective movements. One was the basic Marxist platform that I joined, and as I was beginning to see it, they were treating nationality as a distracting nuisance that stood in the way of class struggle, rather than something that a nation of people should have the time and space of their own to determine and do their political work from towards class struggle. And the other 2 movements was basically they were 2 coalitions, citywide coalitions, that were formed in response to the police murders of one, a African-American woman in her car by 4 off-duty drunk police officers, and then a week later, a young man by the name of Byron Gillum, who was murdered, who was an off-duty security guard, murdered by the police. So these were the 3 movements that I was involved in. Going back to the Marxist group that I was in at the time, the organization itself, and I don't need to name it at this point since it is a relic and is now collapsing from within, took a position that if they were going to be a communist workers' party, they were going to have its members in industrial jobs. You know, those industrial jobs that have been dwindling in numbers since the goddamn 1980s. Well, I quit the kitchen job that I had. Some 3 years back already, and I had a brief job assembling motherboards for compact computers during the activist period. Because I couldn't get into any of the big industrial companies like Hormel or DuPont, maybe because my dad didn't look like Michael Moore or some shit, I needed a steady job for myself quick. So I settled for this sweatshop that got over on a workforce consisting of immigrants and ex-cons on parole. Remind me to make an episode about Rawson and Koenig. Yeah, that's the name of this shitty place. Anyway, they were not the nice cushy shop that had a union there at all. This fire at will, drug test while you were still lying bleeding on a stretcher, no medical plan, freeze in winter, burn in summer plant from the 9th circle of hell is exactly the wet dream of the Texas capitalist that a bootlicking business simp like Big J XXX, I'm naming you, love to salute in his Big J's Political Ideology, Radical Centrism video. Go to his goddamn channel and listen to what he thinks are great kinds of people. Then he wants to ask, how does he support oppression? Your whole fucking video lays that out, son. Anyway, going back, this contradiction about the party that I belonged to was the biggest, bitterest pill to swallow, because while my quote-unquote comrades were selling papers outside of these bigger plants with the OSHA jumpsuits, and they're getting paid wages that they were indeed rightfully fought for, that would send their kids to four-year community college at least and get a second truck in the garage, the plant I worked in was full of workers who capitalism was already fucking in the ass with no Vaseline. None of these Workers International singing motherfuckers would be found a mile away near the plant that I wound up working in, and many thousands like them all over the South. Hell, it's like big labor, as much as a class traitorous outfit that they are. They would have been welcomed in our little corner of the proletarian hell if they would have tried to fight their way into these places like ours. So there was the race thing on one end, and now I'm beginning to see that there was a class contradiction even within the working class. Then back in the community that I did most of my political work in, the three main grassroots leaders, I guess they started feeling the big chill of their late 40s and early 50s. So because of this, they began making moves that unfortunately left a bitter taste in my mouth, and I'm sure I was not the only one who tasted it. In some ways, I can't blame them, since we all go through this as adults. We hit a certain age, and we just want some level of security and a feeling of reward after our youth is spent working, whether it's a job or for social change. But these people had to be douches about it. So all the work that we did around these two big police brutality cases that were within a week of each other, that waged the campaign of protest in the city, became focused on institutionalizing our efforts by trying to make a civilian review board. So, in other words, we went from demanding the jailing and the conviction for these cops, went from that to putting all our focus in creating a civilian review board. And while a civilian review board is a good idea, in this current society, a civilian review board that did not have teeth, like the power to immediately fire the police or take police off the force if they are caught up in a police brutality case. If a civilian review board has no teeth, then all it is just a decorative pacifier to quell public outrage. And then all three of these leaders began to get snippy and pissy when the grassroots expressed disagreement with their directions on this review board by pushing back at us with claims of who does what the most, their sacrifices, what dangers they've suffered at the hands of police harassment, and blah, blah, blah. At that time, I just had it. I started seeing these people eyeing the city council seats, having lunches with the local commerce dudes, the men in the 10-gallon cowboy hats and $1,000 suits. I was like, fuck this shit. I decided to take a break, write a play, get an apartment, drink heavily, chase women, become a vegetarian, and an anarchist. Well, I made good on all that, except the vegetarian thing lasted 2 years, and the women thing was only a concentrated effort for about 8 months. I did get a girlfriend later. She's still around. Politically, I came to a few conclusions. One, as long as people can still put gas in their car, buy TVs, jerk off to porn, and watch football games, we will never see the reasons why our checking accounts dwindle, why the middle class is shrinking, why we are beginning to share shelter space with homeless people, and who is truly responsible for that. Once the ruling class won't be able to pull any more rabbits out of the hat, then the illusion of we didn't work hard enough or we didn't vote for this guy or that, then the veil unravels. We can throw the proverbial shit to the fan and begin to fight to push the boot off of our collective necks. But until then, it's okay to lean in and do some political work in any way you see fit. Back in the day, I volunteered to work at my local Pacifica radio station, and I got a radio show. I ran it for 5.5 years. Then some 14 years later, I leaned in again and got involved with my local Occupy Wall Street. Actually, my wife did way more, as I felt that I had my time. And so, yes, I did see her and many others in OWS go through exactly what I went through back in 1989. Just churn and burn, a marathon of meetings per day, and fearing that if you stopped at any time, there would be no revolution and you would have failed it, and it would all be your fault. It was a sensation not unlike when armed forces mentally condition their recruits via their physical training routine, obsessed with making social change because that social change must happen right there and then. What I learned back in the early 90s, as demoralized as I felt, hearing the demoralization of family and comrades after 2012, after OWS faded away, is that the continuum for revolutionary social change is like building flights of stairs. We can look back at the slave abolitionist work, the suffrage movement, the labor movements, all from the early part of this century, and see these people as building the first flight of stairs. Then, with big thanks to the baby boomers, came the mass anti-war movement, civil rights, the second wave feminists, and the unraveling of the reactionary culture pre-1960s. They built another flight of stairs. Now you have the generation of the Battle for Seattle, OWS, and Black Lives Matters. And while many of us might have our critiques of these respective movements, you can't take away their efforts and hard-hitting strategy that made us all take notice of the issues they were trying to raise our consciousness about. Therefore, they kept the continuum, bringing direct action, horizontalism, a truly democratic method of grassroots power management, by the way, and decentralized leadership, and using social media and social networks as organization tools. So ultimately, we just need to keep creating the flights of stairs that will hopefully bring us to take down the system itself. There just needs to be a hydra-headed mass movement, but driven by the population itself that no longer has nothing to lose. How long that will take for us to get to that point of anger and political clarity is all guesswork, but it will happen. I have renewed faith that we will continue our heritage of struggle, and those who believe in being social injustice intermediaries, well, they can just be useful for target practice. This is the Garage Autonomist.
We are the future. We are the ones who will inherit this earth. And anyone who stands in our way will suffer the same fate as these men.